The night was unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that makes even the rustling of leaves sound like a whisper from the shadows. Daniel, a single father in his early 30s, tugged the leash of his German shepherd, Max, who seemed unusually restless that evening. Daniel often took Max for a late-night walk through the park after putting his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, to bed. It was his only time to breathe and think without the constant weight of fatherhood pressing on him. His life was simple yet exhausting, working long hours at a construction site, juggling bills, and doing his best to fill the role of both parents for Lily after his wife passed away years ago. But that night was different. Max suddenly froze, ears perked and body tense, before darting into the dense trees, barking furiously. "Max! Heel!" Daniel shouted, but the dog didn't listen, his instincts pulling him towards something unseen. Cursing under his breath, Daniel sprinted after him, branches whipping against his arms as he plunged deeper into the woods. That's when he saw her. A woman lay sprawled in a clearing, the harsh glow of the moon illuminating the dark pool of blood beneath her uniform. She was a police officer, her badge glinting faintly, her chest rising in shallow, erratic breaths. Max whined and pawed at her arm, as if begging her to stay alive. Daniel's heart pounded as he dropped to his knees, fumbling to check her pulse, weak, but there. He tore off his jacket and pressed it against the wound near her abdomen, his hands trembling. The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, filled with pain and fear, her lips barely forming words. "Don't let them find me," she whispered hoarsely before slipping back into unconsciousness. Her words chilled Daniel more than the cold air ever could. Who was she running from? And why would she warn a stranger instead of asking for help? He glanced around the darkened woods, suddenly aware of every creak, every shadow shifting in the distance. Fear clawed at him, but the thought of Lily sleeping peacefully at home steeled his resolve. He had to act fast. Pulling out his phone, his thumb hesitated over the screen. What if calling for help brought the very people she feared? But if he didn't call, she would surely die. His conscience left him no choice. With shaky breaths, he dialed 911, speaking quickly, his voice tight with urgency. Within minutes, the faint wail of sirens approached, red and blue lights flashing through the trees. Paramedics rushed to the scene, lifting the officer onto a stretcher, their hands swift but controlled. Daniel stepped back, his clothes smeared with her blood, Max growling low as if sensing danger still lingered nearby. One of the responders clapped Daniel on the shoulder, muttering, "You probably saved her life, sir." But Daniel didn't feel relief. As the ambulance pulled away, taking the mysterious officer into the night, her words echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain. "Don't let them find me." Daniel woke the next morning with the events of the night still gnawing at his mind, the image of the wounded officer flashing before his eyes each time he blinked. He tried to shake it off, focusing on making Lily's breakfast and getting her ready for school, but his daughter noticed the unusual silence in his demeanor. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked softly, her wide eyes studying his face. He forced a smile, assuring her he was fine, but inside, his stomach churned with unease. On the small kitchen TV, the morning news confirmed what he already knew: Officer Rebecca Hayes in critical condition after being ambushed during a late-night patrol. The report was brief, clinical, and void of the one thing that unsettled Daniel most, her warning. They mentioned nothing about her plea not to be found. Later that day, just as he was settling into the idea that maybe he should let it all go, a sharp knock rattled his front door. When he opened it, 2 men stood on the porch, both in plain clothes, flashing badges too quickly for him to catch the details. They introduced themselves as detectives and immediately launched into a string of questions. How had he found the officer? Did she say anything? Did anyone else see him there? Daniel's chest tightened as he recalled her fragile whisper, but something in the men's cold, rehearsed manner made his instincts scream. They weren't here for the truth, they were fishing, waiting for him to slip. He answered cautiously, sticking to the facts about his dog leading him to her, but firmly shook his head when asked if she'd spoken. The men exchanged glances, the kind that carried unspoken weight, before leaving with a vague warning that they'd be in touch. That night, as Lily slept soundly in her room, Daniel sat by the window with Max at his feet, watching the street. His unease turned to dread when he spotted a black sedan idling near the curb, its headlights off, a shadowy figure barely visible behind the wheel. Max growled low, his hackles raised, confirming what Daniel already felt: someone was watching them. The words "don't let them find me" echoed louder now, no longer just a dying plea but a living warning that danger had spilled over into his world. His hands clenched into fists as he realized he and Lily were no longer just bystanders. They were part of something larger, something corrupt and hidden beneath the very uniforms meant to protect them. He pulled the curtains shut, sat in the dark, and whispered a silent promise to the unconscious officer he had saved: whatever she was fighting against, he wouldn't let them win, not while his daughter's safety and her life hung in the balance. The days that followed blurred into a mix of fear and determination as Daniel tried to live his normal routine while the shadow of danger loomed closer. He took Lily to school, went to work, cooked dinner, but behind every task was the gnawing thought of the wounded officer and the black car that seemed to follow him at odd hours. Eventually, unable to silence his conscience, he visited the hospital where Officer Rebecca Hayes lay recovering. At first, the nurses were hesitant to let him in, but Rebecca herself asked to see the man with the dog. When Daniel stepped inside her dimly lit room, her face was pale, but her eyes carried the steel of someone who refused to give in. She thanked him weakly for saving her life, and then, when the room was empty, she leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper, and revealed the truth. She had uncovered a deep web of corruption inside her own department, officers working hand in glove with a powerful gang, smuggling drugs and money under the cover of official duty. She had gathered evidence, hidden it away, but before she could expose them, she was ambushed. Her radio had been sabotaged, her partners compromised. "I can't trust anyone," she rasped, her gaze locking onto Daniel's. "But you came back when you didn't have to. That tells me I can trust you." Daniel sat stunned, his mind spinning. He was just a single dad trying to keep his daughter safe, not some hero who could fight against a gang and corrupt cops. But Rebecca's desperation and his own memory of her blood-soaked body stirred something inside him, a fire that refused to let him turn away. Max seemed to sense it too, his loyal brown eyes fixed on Rebecca as if promising her his protection. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself swept into her battle, retrieving a hidden flash drive from her apartment while keeping his movements discreet, learning to scan the streets for tails, and even using Max's sharp instincts to warn him of danger. What had started as an act of compassion had turned into a dangerous mission, one that pulled him deeper with every passing day. At night, when Lily asked why Max was acting so watchful or why her daddy seemed so tired, he only smiled and told her everything was fine. But one evening, as she hugged him tight, she whispered, "Daddy, you're like a hero now," her innocent words cutting through his fear and filling him with a strange, steady strength. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he had a purpose greater than just surviving day by day. He wasn't just protecting a stranger, he was standing up for what was right, for the kind of world he wanted his daughter to grow up in. The night the truth finally broke open was one Daniel would never forget, a night that tested every ounce of courage he never thought he had. Rebecca had recovered enough strength to stand, and together with Daniel, Max, and a handful of officers she trusted, they prepared to deliver the evidence that would expose the corruption festering inside the department. The plan was simple. Meet in a secure location with honest detectives, hand over the files, and ensure the chain of custody was ironclad. But nothing about that night went according to plan. As Daniel parked his battered truck in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse lot, headlights suddenly blazed behind them and the screech of tires cut through the air. Men with guns poured out, their movements swift, their intent unmistakable. They had been betrayed. Daniel's heart thundered as he shoved Lily, who had been quietly sketching in the back seat, down low, yelling at her not to move. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks echoing through the night as Rebecca returned fire with cold precision, her injured body moving with sheer willpower. Max leapt from the truck like a missile, tackling one of the gunmen, his teeth sinking into flesh as the man screamed and dropped his weapon. Daniel, adrenaline surging, fought with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed, wrestling a gun away from another attacker and using it to hold them back. Just when it seemed they would be overrun, sirens wailed in the distance and unmarked police cars screeched onto the lot. The detectives Rebecca trusted had followed the hidden signal she set earlier. Within moments, the firefight ended in a storm of arrests, the gang members and their dirty cop allies hauled away in handcuffs, their faces twisted with rage as their empire crumbled before their eyes. News of the takedown spread like wildfire, and the city woke the next morning to headlines of betrayal and bravery, corruption rooted out, justice served, and the shocking role of a single dad and his dog who had risked everything to help. Days later, in a crowded press room, Rebecca stood with Daniel and Max at her side, her voice steady as she told the world she would not be alive if not for them. The entire police force, rows of officers in uniform, stood in stunned respect as Daniel, ordinary, untrained, just a father who loved his daughter, was honored with a medal of bravery alongside Max, who received his own commendation as a hero. Cameras flashed, applause roared, but what mattered most to Daniel was the small hand that slipped into his. Lily looked up at him, her eyes shining with pride, and whispered, "See, Daddy. I told you, you're a hero." And for the first time in a long while, Daniel believed it, realizing that heroism wasn't about power or rank, but about choosing to stand when the world tried to force you to kneel.